Welcome to True Betrayal Stories. Tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if you're new here, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below. We'd love to hear what you think. What does it mean to belong? Ethan Caldwell pondered this as he stood by the stone fireplace in their Maplewood, Ohio home, the November rain drumming a soft, relentless rhythm against the tall windows. The amber glow of his whiskey caught the firelight, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill seeping through the glass, where Ohio's late fall pressed like an uninvited guest. Inside, the living room buzzed with the clatter of plates and the laughter of relatives gathered for Thanksgiving, but an undercurrent of tension coiled beneath the surface, sharp as the scent of pine logs crackling in the hearth. Ethan's gaze drifted to his daughter, 14-year-old Mira, who hovered at the room's edge, her auburn hair falling over one shoulder, her hazel eyes flickering with a mix of hope and wariness. Mira wore a burgundy dress, its simple cut a compromise between her love for comfort and her stepmother Clara's insistence on sophistication. Ethan adored how it suited her, understated yet bold, like the sketches she spent hours perfecting in her room. He remembered the day they'd chosen it, Mira rolling her eyes at Clara's suggestions of lace and frills, Ethan chuckling as they settled on something that felt like her. Now, though, his grip tightened around the glass as Clara's mother, Evelyn Strathmore, took center stage. Evelyn, with her silver hair swept into a flawless chignon, radiated authority. Her silk blouse shimmered under the chandelier, her pearls gleamed like small moons, and her smile, polished but cold, promised kindness while delivering judgment. "My dear family," Evelyn announced, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade through silk. "This year, I've selected gifts for my grandchildren, tokens to root you in the Strathmore legacy." She gestured to a mahogany table where silk pouches lay in neat rows, each tied with a gold ribbon. The cousins surged forward, their polished shoes clicking on the oak floor, their faces alight with anticipation. Sophie, Clara's niece, tugged at her braid, her eyes wide. Nathan, her nephew, stood tall, already mimicking his father's confident posture. Ethan watched Mira inch closer, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled, her expression a fragile blend of longing and dread. Evelyn distributed her treasures with the precision of a conductor. "Sophie, this locket bears the Strathmore monogram, passed down from my grandmother, a reminder of our enduring name." The silver chain caught the firelight as Sophie gasped, clutching it to her chest. "Nathan, these cufflinks belong to your great-uncle, crafted for the man who'll carry our legacy." The boy nodded solemnly as if accepting a knighthood. Each gift came with a story, a thread weaving the recipients into a lineage Mira could only observe from the sidelines. Ethan's jaw clenched as he glanced at Clara, his wife of 4 years, standing beside her mother. Clara's smile was her professional one, honed from years as a school counselor, the kind that soothed anxious parents while her mind cataloged their flaws. He waited for her to notice Mira, to step in, to bridge the gap between his daughter and this family she'd promised to embrace. But Clara's eyes remained on Evelyn, her posture deferential, her silence a betrayal in itself. Mira took a hesitant step forward as the last cousin claimed their gift. "Is there something for me, Grandma Evelyn?" Her voice was soft but clear, slicing through the room's hum like a bell in fog. The chatter stilled. Evelyn's smile tightened, her gaze sweeping over Mira like a jeweler appraising a flawed gem. "Oh, sweet girl," Evelyn said, her words slow and deliberate, each one a polished stone dropped into still water. "These are Strathmore heirlooms, meant for family." The emphasis on family landed like a blow, rippling through the room. Mira's face faltered, her lips parting as if to protest, but no sound came. Her eyes, bright with unshed tears, darted to the floor. She nodded once, sharply, and retreated to the corner, her shoulders curling inward as if to shield herself from the weight of those words. Ethan's whiskey burned in his throat, its heat no match for the cold fury rising in his chest. He watched Mira shrink, her defiance crumbling under the sting of rejection. He thought of the promises Clara had made 4 years ago, under a spring sky, vowing to love Mira as her own, to build a family where his daughter would never feel alone. Those words felt like dust now, scattered by Evelyn's calculated cruelty and Clara's complicity. He turned to Clara, expecting outrage, a defense, anything. Instead, Clara smoothed her navy dress, her fingers lingering on the fabric as if grounding herself. "Mom's just being traditional, Mira," she said, her voice soft but hollow. "These are Strathmore keepsakes. You understand, don't you?" Mira didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the floor. The room resumed its buzz, cousins admiring their gifts, aunts clinking wine glasses, uncles debating football, but Ethan stood frozen, the fire's warmth unable to reach the ice in his veins. Mira's expression, hurt masked by a stubborn resolve, etched itself into his memory. He remembered a moment from last summer when Mira, then 13, had shown him a sketch of their old dog, Baxter, capturing his soulful eyes with a few deft strokes. "You see things others miss," he'd told her, and she'd beamed. Now she was invisible to the people who should have seen her most. 3 hours later, Ethan drove home through Maplewood's rain-slicked streets, the windshield wipers a metronome to his churning thoughts. In the rearview mirror, Mira stared out the window, her reflection ghostly against the night, her headphones on, but her stillness betraying that she was listening. Clara sat beside him, scrolling through emails on her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's cold light, as if the evening's wound hadn't touched her. "That was cruel," Ethan said, his voice low but edged with steel. "Your mother called my daughter an outsider, and you backed her up." Clara sighed, not looking up. "Let's not blow this out of proportion, Ethan. Mom's particular about tradition." "Tradition?" Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel, the leather creaking under his grip. "She humiliated Mira in front of everyone, and you said nothing." "I didn't agree with her," Clara snapped, setting her phone down. "I explained the situation. There's a difference." "Is there?" Ethan glanced at Mira in the mirror. Her headphones couldn't hide the way her shoulders tensed at Clara's words. "You let her feel like she doesn't belong." Clara's voice softened, but it carried an edge. "I love Mira, Ethan, you know that. But those heirlooms are Strathmore relics, passed down for generations. Mom wasn't trying to hurt her. Then why didn't you stop her?" Ethan's words hung in the air, unanswered. The silence stretched, heavy as the rain, until they pulled into their driveway. Their home, a two-story craftsman with a wraparound porch Ethan had rebuilt himself, glowed under the porch light. He'd spent months sanding the oak beams, laying new planks, turning the porch into a haven where he and Mira would sit on summer evenings, her sketching while he whittled small figures, a deer, a bird, a tree. That porch was a promise of stability, one he'd kept even after the accident that nearly broke him. Inside, Mira vanished upstairs without a word, her footsteps light but deliberate. Ethan started to follow, but Clara caught his arm, her nails pressing into his sleeve. "Give her space, Ethan. She'll be okay." "She's not okay," Ethan said, pulling free. "She was humiliated and you stood by." Clara's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. "My mother's health is fragile, Ethan. She's been through enough. The last thing she needs is this drama." "Drama?" Ethan's voice rose, then dropped as he remembered Mira upstairs. "This isn't drama. This is my daughter being told she's not enough, and you're not reacting at all." He climbed the stairs, memories flooding back like a tide. 8 years ago, he'd been Maplewood's go-to contractor, known for building homes that felt like sanctuaries. Families trusted him to craft spaces where memories would grow. Kitchens for holiday feasts, bedrooms for whispered secrets. Then came the accident, a fall from a scaffold during a storm, his leg shattering on the concrete below. The surgeries, the pain meds, the slow limp that never fully faded. His business faltered as clients drifted away, his confidence eroded by whispers that he'd lost his edge. Friends who'd once filled his home with laughter vanished like morning mist. With his last savings, he'd opened a woodworking shop in a converted shed behind the house, a place to restore antique furniture and, piece by piece, himself. Outside Mira's door, Ethan paused, listening. No sound, not even the scratch of her pencil, which worried him more than tears would have. He knocked softly. "Mira, can I come in?" A muffled okay came through the door. Inside, Mira sat cross-legged on her bed, her sketchbook open but untouched, a blank page staring back at her. Her room was a vibrant chaos, books stacked by size, not title, their spines a rainbow of colors, posters of indie bands Ethan pretended to know, like the Paper Kites and Iron and Wine, and sketches pinned to the walls, each one a glimpse into her world. A half-finished watercolor of the Ohio River at dusk glowed on an easel, its blues and golds capturing the moment the sky seemed to hold its breath. A small clay sculpture of a fox, one of Mira's first attempts, sat on her desk, its slightly lopsided ears endearing in their imperfection. "You okay?" Ethan asked, sitting on the bed's edge, the mattress dipping under his weight. "Fine," Mira said, her eyes on the sketchbook, her fingers tracing its edge. "I get it, Dad. I'm not their family. It's whatever." "It's not whatever." Ethan's voice was firm but gentle, his hand hovering near hers, unsure if she'd welcome the touch. "What happened today was wrong." Mira looked up, her eyes searching his, bright with a mix of hurt and defiance. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't Clara?" The question struck like a hammer, splintering Ethan's resolve. He'd stayed silent, caught in the web of his gratitude for Clara's stability, her steady income that had kept them afloat when his world crumbled. 5 years ago, at a parent-teacher conference, Clara had approached him, her smile warm as she admired a wooden music box he'd made for Mira's school auction. Her interest in his craft, her care for Mira, had felt like a lifeline after years of grief and loss. His first wife, Lily, had died when Mira was 6, taken by cancer that moved with merciless speed. Clara's promises to love Mira had seemed genuine, her courtship a whirlwind of hope. Dinners at quiet bistros, weekend hikes along the Cuyahoga, introductions to her family. Evelyn had been distant from the start, her smiles as cold as marble, but Clara had assured him, "She'll warm up once she knows you, once she sees how happy we are." Ethan had wanted to believe her, had clung to that hope like a man drowning. "I'm sorry, kiddo," Ethan said, his voice thick with regret. "I should have spoken up. I was caught off guard, trying to keep the peace. But that's no excuse. It won't happen again." Mira shrugged, but her eyes softened, a flicker of trust returning. Ethan pulled her into a hug, her strawberry-scented hair a reminder of her stubborn independence. She'd bought that shampoo with her own allowance, rejecting Clara's lavender-scented suggestions. He remembered the day she'd come home with it, grinning as she declared, "It's my smell, Dad. Clara can keep her fancy stuff." That spark, that defiance, was still there, buried under today's hurt. "Get some sleep," he said, standing. "Tomorrow's a new day." Downstairs, Clara was on the phone, her voice hushed but urgent. "Everything's fine, Mom." "No, he's not making a scene." "Yes, I remember our plan." She glanced up, saw Ethan, and ended the call with a quick, "I'll call you tomorrow." Setting the phone down, she adopted her counselor's tone, smooth and concerned. "How's Mira?" "Hurt, confused, wondering why her stepmother didn't defend her when she was publicly excluded." "That's unfair," Clara said, rubbing her temples as if warding off a headache. "Mom's difficult, I know, but those heirlooms are for Strathmore descendants. It's tradition, Ethan." "Tradition," Ethan echoed, his laugh bitter, sharp as the whiskey's aftertaste. "Is it also tradition to make a child feel worthless in front of a room full of people?" "You're twisting her words," Clara said, her voice rising before she caught herself. "I'm not the enemy here. You're not acting like an ally either," Ethan said, turning away, unable to meet her eyes without seeing Evelyn's cold calculation reflected back. "I'm going to bed." "Ethan, wait!" Clara's voice followed him, but he was already climbing the stairs, the distance between them widening with each step. In bed, he lay awake, the rain's steady patter a counterpoint to his racing thoughts. He thought of Lily, how she'd sing to Mira at night, her voice soft as a summer breeze. He thought of the man he'd been before the accident, confident, capable, the one people turned to when foundations cracked. That man was still in there, he told himself, buried but not gone. And for Mira, he'd find him again. The next morning, Ethan sat across from Rachel Voss, his sister-in-law, at a bustling Maplewood cafe called the Rusty Mug. The air smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls, the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation a shield against prying ears. Rachel, with her dark curls spilling over her shoulders and tattoos peeking from her sweater's cuffs, was a stark contrast to Clara's polished restraint. Her eyes, so like her sister Lily's, narrowed with concern as she slid a steaming mug across the table, its warmth seeping into Ethan's hands. "You look like you've been dragged through hell," Rachel said, leaning back, her leather jacket creaking. "Not surprised, given what you told me about last night." "I feel like it," Ethan admitted, wrapping his hands around the mug, the ceramic hot against his palms. I should have seen this coming, Rachel. Evelyn's been cold from the start, but I thought Clara would step up for Mira. Don't beat yourself up for trusting a viper, Rachel said, her tone sharp but warm, like a fire you could sit by. Clara's too perfect, too calculated. I never trusted her, not from the moment you introduced us. Ethan sighed, stirring his coffee, the spoon clinking softly. You were right. Mira's trying to act tough, but I know she's hurting. She's got Lily's resilience, but she shouldn't have to use it like this. Rachel's expression softened at the mention of her sister, gone 8 years now. Cancer had taken Lily swiftly, leaving Ethan and 6-year-old Mira reeling in its wake. Rachel had been there through it all, dropping everything to help with Mira's school runs, bringing takeout when Ethan couldn't face cooking. She'd moved to Maplewood 2 years ago, leaving her job as a graphic designer in Chicago to be closer to her niece, a decision she never regretted, though she'd roll her eyes and call it temporary insanity when teased. She's strong, Rachel said, her voice low, like Lily was. Remember how Lily would face down anyone who crossed her? That time she chased off those kids bullying Mira at the park, all 5 feet of her staring them down like a lioness? Rachel smiled, but it faded. How's Mira holding up now? Better than she should have to, Ethan said, his voice heavy. She's pretending it doesn't bother her, but I saw her face last night. She's questioning where she fits, and that kills me. Rachel's eyes darkened, her fingers tapping the table. I need details. Walk me through it again. Ethan recounted the Thanksgiving scene, Evelyn's heirlooms, Mira's hopeful question, the cutting dismissal, Clara's weak excuse. He described Mira's retreat, the way her shoulders squared as if bracing for another blow. It wasn't just Evelyn, he said. Clara's silence was worse. She promised to be Mira's mom, Rachel. She stood there and let it happen. Rachel's jaw tightened. Clara's always been Evelyn's shadow. You remember their family dinner, 3 years ago? Evelyn criticized Clara's job, her haircut, even the wine she brought, and Clara just nodded, like a scolded kid. I told you then she'd never stand up to her mom. You did, Ethan said, rubbing his neck. I thought it was just Evelyn being Evelyn. Clara seemed different with me, with Mira, at least at first. People like Clara are good at seeming, Rachel said, sipping her coffee. But seeming isn't being. What's your next move? I need a favor, Ethan said, leaning forward. Clara's been pushing this exclusive summer camp for Mira. 3 months away, some fancy place in Vermont. I didn't think much of it at first, but after last night, I'm wondering if it's part of something bigger. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Let me guess, Evelyn's idea? How'd you know? Because that woman's been pulling strings since you said I do, Rachel said, setting her cup down with a decisive clink. She's got Clara wrapped around her finger, and now they're targeting Mira. What's the favor? I need someone to watch Mira when I can't, Ethan said. Someone I trust completely. Clara's been hinting at more adult-only events, and I don't want Mira left with Evelyn's crowd. Done, Rachel said without hesitation, her voice firm. No payment needed, Ethan. Mira's my niece, my only family besides my train wreck of a brother in Seattle. I'd do anything for her. Relief flooded Ethan, loosening the knot in his chest. Thank you, Rachel. I mean it. Don't thank me yet, she said, her smile wry. You're going to owe me coffee for life. What's your plan? You can't just avoid this and hope it goes away. Evelyn's not the type to back off. I'm working on it, Ethan said, hesitating. There's more. Last week I overheard Clara and Evelyn talking when they thought I was in the shop. Legal terms, guardianship, inheritance, contingencies. They stopped when they realized I was near, but it felt off. Rachel's expression hardened, her tattoos catching the cafe's warm light. A phoenix on one wrist, a compass on the other, symbols of rebirth and direction. Has it crossed your mind that Clara married you for status? Her last engagement fell apart, right? Big society wedding, then the guy bailed 2 weeks before. Humiliating for Evelyn, who's obsessed with appearances. You were the perfect fix. Stable, hardworking, a grieving widower with a kid. Respectable, but malleable. Ethan nodded slowly, the thought bitter as the coffee's dregs. He'd heard whispers about Clara's broken engagement, but never pressed her on it. She'd mentioned it once, dismissing it as a youthful mistake, her smile tight. You think I was the safe bet? The reliable backup? I think, Rachel said carefully, Clara does what Evelyn tells her, always has. If Evelyn saw you as a way to restore Clara's image, Clara would fall in line. Mira, though, she's the wild card. Evelyn doesn't like wild cards. The idea stung deeper than Ethan expected. He'd believed Clara loved him, saw something real in him, his quiet strength, his craft, his devotion to Mira. The alternative, that he was a pawn in Evelyn's game, twisted his gut. Well, he said, his voice low, she miscalculated. Rachel's smile was fierce, a glint of defiance in her eyes. That's the spirit. When do I start watching Mira? Tomorrow, Ethan said. I've got a meeting in Cleveland. Done, Rachel said, standing as they finished their coffee. In the parking lot, she turned to him, her expression serious. You know I've got your back, right? Whatever you need. I know, Ethan said, hugging her briefly, her leather jacket cool against his hands. Did you ever like Clara? Rachel asked, sliding into her car, her keys jangling. Honestly? No, she admitted, her voice blunt. She reminded me of those girls in high school who'd smile to your face while sharpening the knife. But I stayed quiet because you seemed happy. Were you? I thought I was, Ethan said, the words heavy. For a while. Now I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years. Back home, Clara was in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low. She smiled when she saw Ethan, but it didn't reach her eyes, a practiced curve of lips. I'll call you back, Mom, she said, ending the call with a tap. Where were you? Coffee with Rachel, Ethan said, keeping his tone neutral, hanging his coat on the rack. Rachel Voss, your ex-sister-in-law. A flicker of annoyance crossed Clara's face, quickly masked. That's unexpected. She's Mira's aunt, Ethan said, meeting her gaze. We're reconnecting. Clara turned to the fridge, her back to him, her movements precise as she pulled out ingredients for dinner. That's nice. By the way, Mom wants us for dinner next weekend. Just adults. She thought it might be dull for Mira. All business talk. I'll ask Rachel to watch her, Ethan said, watching Clara's reaction closely. She turned, surprise evident in her widened eyes. You've already arranged that? Just now, Ethan said, his expression mild, giving nothing away. Problem? No, Clara said, her smile tight, her fingers gripping the carrot she held a fraction too tightly. It's good she'll be with family. The word family carried a subtle sting, a barb cloaked in politeness. Ethan let it pass, noting the calculation in her eyes as she resumed chopping vegetables, the knife's rhythm slightly off. He thought of an anecdote Rachel had shared over coffee, how Lily years ago had confronted a neighbor who'd called Mira that poor widower's kid. Lily had marched to their door, her voice calm but unyielding, demanding an apology. Nobody defines my daughter but her, she'd said. Ethan wished he'd channeled that fire last night, wished he'd called out Evelyn's cruelty the moment it happened. But he hadn't, and now he carried that failure like a stone in his chest. Ethan sat across from Lucas Hayes in a sleek office overlooking the Cuyahoga River, the late afternoon sun glinting off the water like scattered coins. The Cleveland skyline loomed beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a reminder of the world beyond Maplewood's quiet streets. Lucas, Ethan's old high school friend, leaned back in his leather chair, his sharp eyes scanning a document Ethan had handed him. Once the wiry kid who'd argued his way to debate team captain, Lucas was now one of Cleveland's top family lawyers, his office a blend of modern minimalism and old-school charm. Polished wood shelves lined with law books, a single-frame photo of his daughter on the desk. Bad news first, Lucas said, sliding the paper across the desk, his voice calm but weighted. You signed this 3 months ago. Guardian contingency form. Clara said it was standard for blended families, right? Ethan's stomach dropped as he scanned the page, recognition dawning like a slow bruise. The document was neatly typed, its language dense but deliberate. He remembered Clara presenting it one evening, her tone casual as she'd poured him coffee in their kitchen. Just a precaution, she said, her smile warm. For Mira's sake, in case anything happens to you. He'd signed it, distracted by a late order at the shop, trusting her judgment. Now the words stared back at him, cold and calculated. Lucas pointed to a paragraph near the bottom, his pen circling a clause. This gives Clara partial custody of Mira if you're deemed incapacitated, a term that's deliberately vague. Could mean physical injury, mental health issues, even substance abuse. It's a legal landmine. Ethan's blood ran cold. his fingers tightening around the document until the edges crinkled. "I was on pain meds after my leg surgery," he said, his voice low. "Prescribed, legal, weaned off years ago. Could they twist that? With the right lawyer, they could spin it into dependency," Lucas said grimly, leaning forward, his elbows on the desk. "Paint you as unstable, unfit. There's more. This writer, initialed here, allows Clara to petition for full custody if the partial arrangement proves untenable. Another vague term, open to interpretation." Ethan's breath caught, the room shrinking around him. "She wouldn't," he said, but doubt gnawed at his certainty. He thought of Clara's recent behavior, her questions about his medication history, her suggestion he see a therapist for stress he didn't feel, the way she'd watch him when she thought he wasn't looking. "Evelyn would," he added, the realization settling like ash. Lucas nodded, his expression a mix of sympathy and resolve. "Evelyn Strathmore has a reputation in legal circles. Old money, old grudges, old ways of getting what she wants. If she decides someone doesn't fit her family's image, she doesn't just cut them out. She obliterates them. Reputations, finances, relationships. I've seen it." Ethan ran a hand over his face, the stubble rough against his palm. He remembered a story Lucas had told him years ago, over beers at a high school reunion. A local businessman had crossed Evelyn by refusing to sell her a prime piece of land. Within months, his company faced audits, his contracts dried up, and his marriage unraveled under rumors of infidelity. Rumors, Lucas had hinted, that Evelyn's connections had seeded. The man left Maplewood, a shadow of himself. Ethan had dismissed it as gossip then. Now it felt like a warning. "What's the good news?" Ethan asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Lucas's mouth quirked, not quite a smile. "The document isn't filed yet. It's signed, prepared, but not submitted to the court. That gives us time to build your case." He pulled out a new folder, its contents crisp and organized. "I've drafted counter documents, ones that protect Mira's interests and yours. Custody clarifications, financial safeguards, a revocation of the contingency form. We need to file these before they move on theirs." Ethan scanned the new papers, the legal jargon blurring under his focus. He thought of Mira, her sketchbook filled with dreams, rivers and stars, worlds she created when reality felt too heavy. He couldn't let Evelyn and Clara reshape her future, couldn't let them turn her into a footnote in their pristine legacy. "How soon can we file?" "Tomorrow, if you're ready," Lucas said, gathering the documents. "But we need more than paperwork. Evidence, records, communications, anything showing their intent. You mentioned overhearing them. What exactly did you hear?" Ethan leaned back, the memory sharp. "Last week I came in from the shop early. Clara and Evelyn were in the study, door half open. They were talking about guardianship contingencies and inheritance provisions. Evelyn said something about securing the family's future, and Clara mentioned a meeting with someone named Harold Vance. They stopped when they heard me." Lucas's pen paused, his eyes narrowing. "Harold Vance is Evelyn's lawyer, old school, ruthless. If they're meeting with him, they're serious. Did you catch anything else?" Ethan shook his head. "They switched to small talk when I walked in. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way they looked at each other, like they were hiding a blueprint." Lucas tapped his pen against the desk, thinking. "Start documenting everything. Conversations, dates, times. If Clara pushes that summer camp again, note it. If Evelyn makes another move against Mira, write it down. And watch your back. Evelyn's not above playing dirty." "Why are you helping me like this?" Ethan asked, signing the new documents, the pen's weight grounding him. "This is above and beyond, Lucas." Lucas shrugged, but his eyes held a glint of something personal. "Because I remember what you did for me junior year. Those seniors were using me as a punching bag, and you stepped in, took a black eye for it, because Mira deserves better than being collateral in Evelyn's game. And because I've seen what Evelyn Strathmore does to people who cross her, families torn apart, lives upended. I don't want that for you." "What does she do exactly?" Ethan asked, his voice low, bracing for the answer. Lucas's smile was humorless. "She uses every connection, every favor owed, every skeleton in every closet until there's nothing left. Lawsuits, smear campaigns, financial pressure. But she's not infallible. No one is. We just need to be smarter. Ethan stood, the signed documents a shield in his hands. Thank you, Lucas. I mean it. Don't thank me yet, Lucas said, walking him to the door. This is just the beginning. Stay sharp, Ethan. If they're already preparing custody documents, they're not playing for small stakes. As Ethan drove home, the Cuyahoga's glint fading in his rear view, the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with chilling clarity. Clara's sudden interest in his medication history wasn't concern. It was reconnaissance. Her suggestion he see a therapist wasn't about his well-being. It was about planting seeds of doubt. The brochures for boarding schools that had appeared on her desk, glossy and exclusive, weren't random. They were steps in a plan to distance Mira, to erase her from their carefully curated world. This wasn't just about sidelining his daughter. It was about dismantling his role as her father. He thought of a moment from 2 years ago, when Mira had joined a school art club. Clara had encouraged it, praising Mira's talent. But later, Ethan overheard her on the phone with Evelyn, dismissing the club as a distraction from more serious pursuits. He'd brushed it off then, chalking it up to Evelyn's influence. Now he saw it as a pattern. Clara's affection was performative, a mask that slipped when Evelyn's shadow loomed. By the time he reached Maplewood, the anger in his chest had hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about his marriage anymore. It was about protecting Mira from people who saw her as an obstacle rather than a child deserving of love. He pulled into the driveway, the craftsman's porch light a beacon in the dusk. Clara was in the kitchen when he entered, chopping carrots with precise, practiced movements, the knife's rhythm steady but tense. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice light, not looking up. "Productive," Ethan said, hanging his keys on the hook. "Yours?" "Fine," Clara said, her knife pausing briefly. "Mom called. She wants to move next weekend's dinner to her house instead of the restaurant. More private." "Fine by me," Ethan said, watching her closely. Her shoulders stiffened, a telltale sign of surprise at his easy agreement. "Really?" she said, glancing up, her eyes searching his. "I thought you might object." "Why would I?" Ethan kept his tone neutral, leaning against the counter. "It's just dinner." A flicker of suspicion crossed Clara's face, quickly masked by her counselor's smile. "Great, I'll let her know." Ethan dropped his keys deliberately, the clink loud in the quiet kitchen. "By the way, I ran into Lucas Hayes today. Remember him? Helped with the insurance stuff after my accident." Clara's knife paused mid-chop, her fingers tightening around the handle. "Vaguely," she said, resuming her task, though the rhythm faltered. "How's he doing?" "Doing well," Ethan said, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. "Family law now, very successful. It's good to have friends in useful places, isn't it?" Clara's movement slowed, her smile strained. "I suppose so. Where's Mira?" "Upstairs, homework," Ethan said, noting the force with which the knife came down, slicing through the carrot with a sharp thwack. "Is everything okay, Clara? You seem off." She met his gaze, her expression a careful blend of concern and deflection. "Everything's fine, Ethan. Why wouldn't it be? You're the one who seems different lately." Ethan smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Just seeing things clearly," he said, turning to climb the stairs to check on Mira. He knew Clara would be on the phone with Evelyn the moment he was out of earshot, analyzing his. The backyard of Evelyn's Maplewood estate was a spectacle, transformed into a carnival for her grandson Owen's birthday. Balloons bobbed in the warm breeze, their reds and blues vivid against the manicured lawn. A bounce house vibrated with children's shrieks, and a cotton candy machine hummed, spinning sugar into pastel clouds. The centerpiece was a race car-shaped cake, its icing gleaming under the midday sun, a testament to Evelyn's flair for excess. Ethan stood near the gift table, a glass of lemonade in hand, its tartness sharp on his tongue. Mira, dressed in a simple denim skirt and a teal blouse she'd chosen with Rachel, pointed to a small box wrapped in gold paper, its ribbon catching the light. "Can I see that one?" Mira asked, her voice hopeful but cautious, as if testing the air for danger. Clara's sister Vanessa smiled thinly, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. "Oh, that's for Owen from Grandma. Family tradition, you know." The emphasis on family was subtle but deliberate. A needle slipped under the skin. Ethan caught the word sting, his grip tightening on the glass. Mira's face fell for a fleeting moment, her lips pressing together before she recovered with a quick nod. "Cool," she said, her voice steady but her eyes dimming. "I'm getting some cake. She walked away, her steps measured, her shoulders squared against the rejection. Ethan watched, pride and fury warring in his chest, pride at her resilience, fury at the necessity of it. He remembered a moment from last spring when Mira had won a school art contest for a painting of Maplewood's old covered bridge. She'd been so proud clutching the certificate, only for Evelyn to remark at a family dinner that, "Art's a nice hobby, but it won't open doors." Mira had smiled politely, but later Ethan found her in the shop, sanding a scrap of wood with fierce focus, as if smoothing away the hurt. "She's handling it well," Clara said, appearing at his side, her floral dress fluttering in the breeze. Her voice was smooth, her counselor's tone, but it grated against Ethan's raw nerves. "Handling what?" he asked, his voice tight, the lemonade's cold sweating against his palm. "Being treated like she doesn't belong by your family?" Clara sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know what I mean, Ethan, the family dynamics." "You mean your family's rejection?" Ethan stepped back, creating distance between them, the grass soft under his boots. "Mira's a trooper, but she shouldn't have to be." Clara's eyes flashed, her voice low but sharp. "Rowan, please, not here. Not in front of everyone." "Where then?" Ethan said, his voice rising before he caught himself, glancing at the nearby guests. Vanessa chatting with a neighbor, Owen's friends chasing each other with water guns. "When, Clara?" "Because it's been weeks since Thanksgiving, and nothing's changed." "These things take time," Clara said, her hands smoothing her dress, a nervous habit Ethan had once found endearing. "Mom's set in her ways, and you know how she is about tradition." "I know how you are about letting her be," Ethan said, his words clipped. "I'm taking Mira home." "The party's not over," Clara protested, her voice rising, drawing a glance from Vanessa. "It is for us," Ethan said, setting his glass on the table with a deliberate clink. He found Mira sitting alone at a picnic table, picking at a slice of cake, the red icing smudged on her plate. Her teal blouse caught the sunlight, making her look older than her 14 years, a girl caught between childhood and the weight of adult betrayals. "Hey, kiddo," Ethan said, sitting beside her, the wooden bench creaking. "Ready to go?" Mira looked up, relief flooding her face. "Can we? Without being rude?" "We can," Ethan said, his voice soft but firm. "And honestly, I don't care about being rude right now." As they walked to the car, Mira was quiet, her sneakers scuffing the gravel path. It wasn't until they were halfway home, the estate's grandeur fading in the rear view, that she spoke, her voice small but piercing. "Dad, why do they hate me?" The question hit Ethan like a physical blow, harder because he'd been dreading it, expecting it since Thanksgiving. He gripped the steering wheel, the leather warm under his hands, and took a breath. "They don't hate you, Mira," he said, choosing his words carefully. "They're broken people, and broken people sometimes hurt others to feel better about themselves." Mira's brow furrowed, her gaze fixed on the passing trees, their leaves tinged with early fall gold. "Am I broken?" "God, no," Ethan said, his voice fierce, glancing at her with a look that begged her to believe him. "You're perfect, exactly as you are. You're kind, you're talented, you're stronger than you know." "Then why doesn't Clara stand up for me?" Mira's voice cracked, the hurt raw. "She promised when you got married that we'd be a real family. She said she'd love me like her own kid." Ethan's heart clenched, the betrayal in Mira's words cutting deeper than his own anger. He'd asked himself the same question countless times, replaying Clara's vows, her smiles, the way she'd read Mira bedtime stories in those early months. He remembered a night 3 years ago when Mira had a nightmare, and Clara had sat with her, stroking her hair until she fell back asleep. He thought then that Clara was different, that she'd meant her promises. Now he saw those moments as calculated, a performance to win his trust. "Sometimes," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the ache, "people make promises they don't intend to keep. It's not about you, Mira. It's about their own limits, their own choices." "That's lying," Mira said, her voice flat, her hands twisting the hem of her blouse. "Yes," Ethan agreed, the word heavy. "It is." They drove in silence, the hum of the engine a soft counterpoint to their thoughts. Mira's question lingered, a wound that wouldn't close. Ethan thought of Lily, how she'd always been honest with Mira, even when it was hard. Once, when Mira was 5, she'd asked why her goldfish died. Lily hadn't sugar-coated it, explaining death gently but truthfully, then helping Mira bury the fish under a rosebush. "Life's messy," Lily had said, "but we face it together." Ethan wished he could channel that clarity now, wished he could shield Mira from this pain. As Ethan gripped the steering wheel, Mira's question echoed in his heart, a call to battle he could no longer ignore. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd feared, but he was done staying silent. What would he do to protect his daughter from those determined to tear them apart? Find out in the next episode.